whiskey go-go.
That sounds pretty good.
You know what? That would probably help both of our colds.
You're right, it would actually.
You guys should a little hot toddy action.
Oh, even better.
That does sound good.
You know, it makes me sad that the holiday season is now ending because all the fun hot drinks disappear.
Hey, why, man? It's January. You could still have, like, hot chocolate and stuff.
Actually, funny story. I was at In-N-Out, and my oldest, I ordered the new In-N-Out hot chocolate to try it. Obviously, it's just going to taste like watery hot chocolate or whatever, but you got to try the new thing, right? It's a new thing. And
the new Hotness.
Oh, no. Oh, no. It's going to be like that, isn't it?
That was a pretty good pun.
With him on here. I'm just going to... my 2-year-old overheard me try to order one and told me, you can't have one. Christmas is over. So I got punked pretty bad on that. But anyway, hey, we're back. We Were Gamers. It's a podcast, JJ.
Yeah. A podcast that has typically been about you and me and how we used to play more games than we currently do. But today, it is a little bit larger than you and me.
It's also with our best bud, Michael.
Hey, guys.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Yeah, it still feels a little bit like a new year, but I don't know about you. We'll get to JJ in a second because that's a longer story, but it feels like the first weekend of the new year just passed where there wasn't a million things going on. Like we finally settled into the year. This feels like New Year.
It finally feels like it's had enough time to do its own thing, and it's not just like some weird little offshoot of the previous year.
Yeah, right? Like I spent a weekend around or near the house doing things that were important to, daily schedules, not to like holidays and seeing people and doing, like all the catch up after the new year and that season's what do you call them? Shenanigans is the wrong word.
Go with it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna roll with it. But I don't know how you feel about that, Michael.
Yeah, it's gotten past the point where I've stopped trying to sign 17 whenever I date something at work, so it's officially the new year.
Yeah, I definitely have that problem still.
That's kind of when it is. Huh? I used to do that into like February before. Oh boy. Well, I still have a cold, and I'll probably do one of the like sniffles without realizing it. JJ, you still have a cold, and
yeah,
it's likely because you spent this weekend in the frozen Nordland.
Yeah, I was in Montreal for a mutual friend's bachelor party. It was a good time, but needless to say, Montreal in January is very, very cold.
Yeah, it's kind of when it might be coldest.
Unclear about when it is coldest. Although I will say some of the local residents mentioned that like a couple weeks before we were there, it had been like minus 20 Fahrenheit at some points.
No.
And they were like, it's so cold that you just can't you can't go outside. It's just not possible because you die within a couple minutes.
Wait,
there's heavy winds.
You went somewhere that's not the desert, and they were like, yeah, you'll die if you go outside?
Yeah, well, it was like 20 below, and then there was wind, like relatively strong wind, which made it closer to like 50 below if you count the wind chill or whatever. And you can't stay outside in 50 below without having serious problems or like extreme covering. And also, 30-mile-an-hour wind is not a place to be going outside anyway.
This is not Antarctica. This is like a place where people live.
Yeah, well, they didn't go outside those days, that's for sure.
Crazy.
Anyway, it was nowhere near that cold, of course. The first day, actually, it wasn't even freezing. Overnight it got down there, but there was no snow on the ground at that time. It wasn't so bad. The next day, like probably about halfway through the day, it started snowing and then continued all night. So there was a good like 1.5 feet of snow on the ground for the rest of the time we were there. and it got much colder at that point. But it was still within the limits of stuff you can handle with a big coat and thermal underwear.
And heading in between buildings, which is basically what you do, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we were in downtown, so it was a relatively manageable experience.
All right.
Yeah. I will say that the town seems really awesome. There's a lot of really cool bars and restaurants. We ate some really great food. Except for that part where the bachelor went to the hospital, everything was pretty good.
I'm sorry, what?
I didn't know if we were going to call it out. We should have probably sent flyers on how to walk on ice.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, obviously it was late at night. Drinking had been involved. But, hearing the account of the accident where I was not there, half of the party had decided to turn in early that night. And I believe this happened around like 2 or 3 a.m. And the other half of the party was with the bachelor, and he literally stepped off of a curb, slipped, twisted his ankle, fell and landed on it, and shattered his ankle. So the other people being helpful, were able to get him off the road first, and piled him up on the side of the road there, and went to go find some help. Eventually someone was able to, one person stayed with him, of course, tried to get passerbys to help call an ambulance or something. We eventually found a hotel concierge up the road a little bit who was willing to help them out, and got him to the hospital safely.
Woof. How is it? How's that Canadian medical system?
Really bad if you're from the U.S.
Oh, no.
It's going to be bad anyway. I mean, if you show up for emergency ankle surgery, they're not going to be able to accommodate you immediately, no matter where you are, probably. But the thing about the healthcare is that it's free in Canada, right? Except not for us, because we're not from there. You get a little card in Canada that we don't have, obviously. So they want you to pay for stuff.
Like up front, huh?
In cash.
Ooh.
So that caused some consternation, but it was taken care of, with ATM access and such by him and the best man who's his cousin. So, it all got taken care of in the end, and it sounded like I saw some pictures that he made it home. So
good vibes that direction. Oh boy.
Yeah.
What's the recovery time on something like that? Do you know?
I don't know exactly how long the entire thing takes. I know there were screws put in and a plate. So I know, I know he's probably going to be on crutches for about 6 weeks, and then I don't know what the process is beyond that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thoughts to you, bud.
I've heard it's actually better to break your ankle than it is to sprain it. Although that sounds pretty extreme.
This was quite a bit worse than just a break.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the what the process is here, but obviously best wishes to that guy, and we will see how it goes. But I think everyone had a really great time, even despite all of the awful stuff there. It's a really fun town. I think I might have preferred to go when it was summer or spring, perhaps.
Winter California temperature would have been nice.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely. But the airport was awesome. The Air Canada, it seems like a great airplane, and a pretty comfortable flight, even on the long distance legs. Certainly much better than the United connections that I took to get there. So
nice.
Yeah, did you appreciate going through customs on the Canadian side?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I was confused about why I was doing that, but then it made perfect sense, because once I'm through that customs, then when I get to my final destination, I just walk off the plane and go home.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I definitely would recommend every airport everywhere do that.
Oh, interesting.
Have U.S. customs at your airport.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of that before. That's cool.
Yeah, so cool. You see the Border Patrol agents or whatever, and you submit the form and all that stuff. right there, and then you go from there, past that to your gate, and then you get on your plane, and at that point, your plane just lands in the domestic terminals, and you can just go home.
I'm sure there are plenty of cities where that's cost effective.
It seems like it might allow them to fly into other airports more easily. Like I connected through Denver on like one of the smallest planes I've ever flown on for a 4.5 hour flight. It's like a 2 and 2, with an aisle down the middle.
Oh, wow.
It's a small plane for a 4.5 hour flight, but it worked.
It gets in the air.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I'm assuming with a trip to the Great White North that you did not have much in the way of video game time. I've just been latening as well. What has been your game of choice for the new year?
I've done a little latening myself, actually. As a Christmas gift, I got the latest game in the Layton series.
How many is this now?
There are 7 now, and they're divided into 2 trilogies. That's the first 6. And then the newest one is the first game to not feature the professor. It features his daughter, Catriel.
Oh boy, have you popped that in?
Just to play the very beginning of it, and then I started playing through the bonus puzzles, which you unlock as soon as you start a new game.
That's right. That is part of the whole Layton series, right? They give you extra puzzles or something like that?
They started it with the 5th one, where you get for the first year after the game launches, every day there's a new puzzle, and the puzzles are in like 30 or 40 groups, so you get a dozen puzzles or so in each group, and they're grouped thematically by type of puzzle.
Like how many matches are in each puzzle?
Yeah. So each puzzle type will have a dozen different puzzles of varying difficulty. And the difficulty grows and shrinks across the year.
Now, you said you played the previous games in the series, right?
Yes, I played through all 6.
So I tend not to read much ahead on games I haven't played before. What the heck are these pick-a-rats for that I'm collecting in the first game? There seems to be nothing to do with them.
Yeah, so those will unlock bonus content at the end of the game.
Like more puzzles or more story or?
Some of both. Not more story. The story is contained. You get the entire story just by playing through the game. But there is bonus content, so you can unlock artwork. You can unlock music tracks, I think they do. And then you can unlock extra puzzles.
So it's kind of like almost like achievement points then.
Yes, and so the better you do on the puzzles throughout the game, the more pick-a-rats you get, and the more you can unlock.
Things give me anxiety. It's always like if you fail the puzzle the first time, you can't get the max pick-a-rats, and then you're going to miss something at the end, but they don't tell you what.
That happened to me, and I got into this habit of saving all of the time so that if I missed the puzzle, I could just turn it off and turn it back on and load it right where I was.
I'm glad to have another completionist on this show.
You guys are crazy.
Just like, not just completion, but like paranoid completionist.
Yeah, that's just, come on. Andrew, you might miss out on a piece of concept art. Oh no.
Yeah. Hey, you're outnumbered.
Except that the rest of the population is on my side, and you two are the weirdos.
Thanks for being the voice of reason, JJ.
It's definitely something that's been said before.
Yeah, actually, probably true. That's awesome.
So what platform are you playing it on, Michael?
This one is for the 3DS.
Oh, so they're still making new games for that thing?
Yes. Yeah, they are. Although, interestingly enough, this was the first one that they did a release for mobile as well. And they actually did the mobile release a couple of months before the 3DS release.
Oh, so this one's also on, like, iPhone?
Yes.
Is the price the same?
I don't remember. I would think that it would be less, only because there's no way to really take advantage of the 3D functionality.
Or the two-screen stuff.
Or the two-screen stuff.
I was just about to mention that, yeah. Is there a way you can tell whether they adapted a phone game to the 3DS, or does it feel like it was made for a 3DS?
It definitely feels like it was made for the 3DS. It has the same feel as the previous games.
Well, that's good news then.
Yeah, they must have redesigned
I wonder
them.
if they adapted it the other way, but then pushed the mobile one first to try and get people to download it before putting it out on 3DS for the people they knew would buy it.
Yeah, that makes some sense.
Speaking of adapting games, I have a question for you guys. And maybe your memory is better than mine. Do you recall with the Wii U, a couple, I think like Ubisoft and a couple other companies kept saying that the architecture of the Wii U made it somewhat prohibitively expensive to make games for it, or port their own games from other systems over because it wasn't the same architecture as the other systems that were out. Am I crazy, or did that happen?
Yes, but that's probably not why they didn't want to port it to the Wii U, although it probably was a factor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why no one wanted to put things on the Wii U is because nobody owned Wii U's, right? It was the sales of that console were extremely poor over the lifetime.
Absolutely. I wonder if maybe if it had been easier to port things to it, whether it would have been less of a cost consideration.
I mean, definitely that would have factored into it, I'm sure. But, you know, they would have come up with other reasons than to not want to port to a poorly owned console.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem with porting to the Wii U specifically was that it felt like it felt in a lot of ways kind of like a half measure. It was an upgrade to the Wii, but it wasn't really a whole next-gen console. So they had already missed out, I think, on their window to bring in the big outside developers with the Wii, and not having them in on the ground floor, even when they rolled out the Wii U and said, hey, here are all these things it does better, it wasn't enough of a jump for them to bring people in and want to make stuff for the system, unlike the Switch.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you think about it this way, right? The Wii was extremely successful, right? There were millions and millions and millions of those things everywhere. People's grandparents bought them, right? They weren't buying tons of other software for it, but they had one at least. So in theory, it's possible their game could get super popular and everyone would want to have one. You know, there's an install base there. Okay, well, the Wii U was a much smaller but more capable version of that console. Well, okay, so you're porting like a more powerful game to like a, 1.5 times better Wii, but the games were generally being targeted for stuff like the Xbox 360 and the PS3, and the Wii U still wasn't as powerful as those in most cases. So like, it's a tough sell. Okay. I can see there.
So my question was going to be, what was the architecture difference? And that kind of answers the question, is it probably couldn't handle the frame rates and graphics levels that the other things had. I was just kind of mulling that over because there's been a rash of stories recently about everybody and their mother trying to port something to the Switch. So, like Hyrule Warriors from the Wii U is coming to the Switch. I just saw another story that says World Ends With You, which was a 3DS game, is coming to the Switch. And I know that, Square Enix and a couple other companies have all said they're bringing stuff to the Switch. And my initial reaction to that was, they're bringing games from what I would determine to be like very different architectures, like the Wii U or the 3DS, over to the Switch. And that kind of threw me for a loop, considering that it was kind of prohibitive before. But I guess it comes down to the Switch can do graphics like of those levels, and also it has an insane install base.
Yeah, I think in general, people want to follow the money, right? And there's a lot of Switches being sold. I think they've said they've sold out like 10 million units or something worldwide, which is really a lot considering it's not that old.
Yep, they outsold lifetime sales on the Wii U already. I saw that about a week ago.
And the trend is increasing, not decreasing.
Right. There are definitely people that still want them that don't have them yet.
Right. So,
I raised my hand, but you can't really see that.
Cough, us, cough.
Yeah.
I put my hand in the air, but I'm like, we're not in the same room, so.
It makes it a lot easier to, make that budget decision and go, well, do we want to spend money on this platform and do some kind of thing? Mm-hmm. When the answer is there's a big audience here of people that want to buy stuff and there aren't a lot of games out for it yet.
Absolutely. Okay.
Also, I think that Nintendo took a different stance with the Switch than they had previously. They're notoriously tight-fisted with their software and letting other developers use it, but I think they changed things up a bit and provided it early to developers so that they could actually work on getting games ahead of time before the Switch was released, like in the pipeline.
Yeah. I do look back at the Wii U and wonder a little bit if they weren't as crazy as people thought, because looking at the form factor of that system, I always think it looks like a test bed for the Switch, like a public beta.
Yeah, I think there's the actual console part, the part with the disk drive and whatnot isn't present, but the gamepad definitely has a lot of notional ideas that I think kind of work a lot better on the Switch, except for that gamepad had a bunch of touchscreen stuff, which I don't think anyone uses in the Switch. So,
the Switch does have one though, right? I mean,
does it? I don't even know. I don't know that I've seen it. But I truthfully don't know. But it helps also that the Switch is a more modern type of technology than what was powering the Wii U and the Wii. It's something that's like a lot more similar to both mobile phone and tablet platforms that are already out there, and also similar to modern computers and consoles as well. So the similarities there give those the people doing the tech work on the back end side for the developers and stuff a lot of legs up. Like they don't have to acquaint themselves with something completely brand new like they did with the Wii and the Wii U. And they can leverage some outside knowledge already that exists, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah. I don't know that we have to put any more time into the Switch if you guys are good. I don't have much more to...
Yeah, I mean, I like the one I have.
Yeah, I'm very happy you have one, because I'm sure we'll get to hear more about it. How's the Xenoblade 2 Chronicles going?
Right wherever it was the last time I played it, like 5 days ago.
right there before Montreal.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Okay. Right on. Well, I don't know. With you having been out of town a little bit, JJ, I don't know how much of it you caught. I know some of it, hopefully. But one of the things I was really happy about with having been home a lot of this weekend and having a relaxed final beginning to the year, and I think this might have been true a little bit for you too, Michael. We talked about AGDQ on the show a little while ago, and that actually just wrapped up on Sunday morning. Very, very early Sunday morning. And man, it was a big one. It had again broke the record for the last from the last time they made the most money that I think they've ever made, which is $2.26 million for the Cancer Foundation.
Rad.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. I actually went in, and I'm going to try and do it without doing research. I went in when it ended, and I looked up like the donation statistics. The average was, I think, a $50 donation, with the highest one being $108
$8,000.
Wow.
Yeah, well, the cool part about it was there were individual donors. It was like 35,000, which was pretty cool.
That's a lot of people.
I actually thought about it. It was only about maybe quarter or even less of the max amount of people that I saw watching that thing at, like the viewer count at individual times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on the main page, the English page. I didn't even look at the restream counts. So there's still, I think they still have room for improvement in terms of getting more people to kick in.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, that'd be pretty great. I think the coolest part of it is always like the runs, the craziest runs you've ever seen, stuff like that. And I saw some pretty good ones, and I wanted to pick your guys' brains about how you feel about AGDQ if you got to see any of it, and wrap up this year's show a little. I can.
Yeah, do you have a good one to start with?
I can kick it off.
I only really saw like a couple, and really only have one I would talk about.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll kick it off with the one I sent you both a message about to remind you that it was actually on, which was the Skyrim speed run, where they basically found ways to use the horse to rocket the character across the entire world so fast that it would crash the game.
That's nuts.
They would do things like run the horse up a mountain and then make the character clip, and then it would just like shoot them out across the map, and sometimes it would just go too fast and the whole thing would soft lock and send it to desktop.
Yeah, momentum physics in some of these games are amazing. I saw a little bit of the Jedi Academy run, and they do something similar where they get on a speeder bike and drive it halfway up the side of a mountain, and then using a pause menu manipulation, they get off the bike and the bike maintains its momentum, and then they force pull the bike to themselves, and it basically hits them and throws their character up to the top of the mountain to the end of the level.
Rad. Right along with that, actually, one of the runs that I did watch was Hollow Knight, and they're doing similar momentum-based stuff there, where they're using, like, opening a menu at a certain point while you're falling so that you fall faster, because it forgets about momentum and stuff. And, like, he gains, like, extra speed and extra floating time and stuff by using the menus. So it seems like momentum-based movement was a big time saver this year.
I wonder if that's because a lot of the games have become a little bit more modern games. I think Summer Games Done Quick is a little bit more of the classic game genres, and these might be a little bit newer games in AGDQ, and a lot of them don't have like the Ocarina of Time. If you walk over here and do this thing inside the Deku tree, then you skip to the end of the game and you can win. That type of stuff seems to have been kind of coded out. So I wonder if the newest way to manipulate these games is finding the way to beat the physics engine and stop it gating like you. I know they did that in the Breath of the Wild run at the end as well, using some type of roll. I don't know, Michael, did you see that one?
I didn't watch that one.
Yeah, they were using some type of like a momentum trick there as well to get across the field as fast as possible. So there's a lot of that I think is just modernized games. They have a hard time breaking them as hard. Maybe.
I think that maybe not that it is less possible to break those games, but that a lot of people don't necessarily like watching runs like that, where they, you clip into the side of the building and you're out of bounds for 90% of the game, and then you just see the credits, right? So they'll, they had a lot of categories where stuff was like no out of bounds, or, the clean 100% version, or, no certain skip versions or whatever. And so, like, it's not that the game doesn't have these problems, it's that they're intentionally not running the category where they use that skip, even if it is faster, in order to produce a product maybe that's more watchable.
I did see the Dark Souls and Bloodborne runs had no certain items were not allowed.
Yeah, like probably because some of those are like either broken or exploitable, or just make the game, just to like make the thing more interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I know as longtime listeners of the podcast will know, I'm a big fan of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and they did a run of that game this year called No Bosses, where they fought no bosses using a whole bunch of clips and tricks and stuff to get out of bounds or to skip rooms or whatever. And the only boss they fought was Dracula in the intro, and then Dracula at the very end of the game. They skipped everything else.
See, that's still interesting.
Yeah. So, you have to go, if you're going to use a bunch of tricks and manipulation and stuff, you got to make it interesting.
Yeah.
And, it ended up becoming hard because there are other times in the game where you like can't avoid certain rooms. So like, how do you get out of the room without having to actually kill the boss or dying, right? So anyway, that's a fun one. The no boss run.
That's awesome.
But like, what were some of the other good ones? I really didn't get to see more than like maybe those two. So
I actually watched the entirety of the Bloodborne run, which was pretty fun because I think it was the guy's first time like running it at an AGDQ, and it was like definitely a streamer that had done it before. But he had kind of a rough time, and I felt like you could feel the room get behind him more when things weren't going his way, and you could tell he had a lot of skill. Right, he was doing a lot of technical things very, very well. But I don't know if either of you have played Bloodborne, but it seemed like there was a lot of random chance with some of the bosses, and sometimes he would just get hit, and it seemed to happen over and over to him. And so it was like a nice community run in a way, I think. I don't know.
That stuff is nice.
Yeah.
The like, let's go, we're all in it together kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were a lot of donations during his time, I think, because of the tough nature of that one. And I have another one I want to talk about, but I want to see if Michael had any go-tos.
I watched a good chunk of the Ori and the Blind Forest run.
Oh, that was so good.
They did I think it was the definitive edition.
Yeah.
As a race.
Four-way
race. And it was fantastic.
Shenanigans.
Oh yeah, because it's a beautiful game to begin with. Just visually and the music, it's a great game. And then to see them just, manipulate the heck out of it is super impressive.
One of the best parts of that as well, and one of the best parts of some of the races, there were a lot of good races, but I think that one was kind of indicative of a lot of them. You could tell they were all trying to go hard at the beginning and do all the tricks like, I'm going to do all the hardest tricks at the beginning, try and get ahead of the other people. And so the guy that held the world record, he was the first one to die doing a trick, and then the next person next to him would die, and unlike most of them where someone's just running away with it, until pretty close to the end when something really funny happened, they were all within a few seconds of each other because, a mistake would catch one of them off guard, and then they would all catch back up, and it was a lot closer than some of the races have been in the past. But then the world record holder at the end of the game gets to, was it the boss, Michael?
It was after the final boss. He was in the end game.
He was in the end game waiting for time, and his game soft locked.
Oh no.
So it sent him back to the desktop, and he had to load back in and replay
the last. I guess the game ends with an escape run. Yeah.
So he ended up in third place rather than second place, or something like that, or fourth place instead of second place. It was really like the entire room couldn't really believe what was happening, and the guy that was racing for last ended up making a mistake, so it ended up being close, and it was pretty funny.
I love stuff like that. I'll have to go find the video and watch that one. That
was a great one.
Really rad.
So a game I wanted to talk about, because I had never seen anything like this before, and maybe you guys have seen it and I just didn't know about it. But right before their last run, the last run was Breath of the Wild, and man, did they made, I think it was like $400K just during the last 3 hours of Breath of the Wild, basically. But right before that was a game that they called Super Dram World 2. Has anybody heard of this before?
That sounds like a Super Mario World ROM hack.
Okay.
It is, and I had to look it up myself because it wasn't... I know a couple of them, but that was not one that I know.
So I didn't know about this ROM hack thing where they put it back on the cart and then you still play it on the system.
Yeah, so I knew that's possible, but I mean, obviously, typically they don't bother to burn it back onto a cart and to play on real hardware.
It seemed like it was being played on hardware.
I would assume that it would be, otherwise I don't think it qualifies for these runs.
Yeah. So this one was remade, and the guy that remade the ROM... So I guess we should be a little bit more specific for people that might be confused. Who's best got a good example of a ROM hack, maybe?
I mean, you can explain it this way. A ROM is the thing on the game cartridge, the actual literal code of the game that makes it run. So a ROM hack would be you taking the contents of that ROM and modifying it and then putting it back on there somehow. Stuff that in the past was done for like fan translation patches and stuff. Those would be considered ROM hacks in a way.
Oh, okay.
But more typically, or the kind of like more to the point of what Andrew's talking about here is Super Mario World had this big following. Everyone loved that game, right? It's a very popular game from the Super Nintendo. But people took and remixed parts of those levels together and made their own versions that are usually like really insanely difficult.
Yeah.
And then people would play them and comment and they kind of people would make them to push each other and stuff.
So it was essentially Super Mario Maker before Super Mario Maker existed.
Except they had to do all of it by hand and figure out how to make all those positions and stuff in using like code and stuff rather than actual like tools like Super Mario Maker has. In some ways, Super Mario Maker supplanted a bunch of this ROM hacking stuff because it made it easier to do, except that no one plays the Wii U anymore.
Yeah, I'm surprised there hasn't even been an announcement for a Mario Maker Switch version.
It really seems like the most obvious thing.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be coming this year.
Especially if there's a touchscreen on it, which I think there is. I was shocked to see... Obviously, these guys had recoded the game, and not just by a little bit. They recoded the game a lot. He wrote his own little text boxes in there. They had recoded the cape so that you turned around 100% of the time to make it more reliable of a tool. All the levels had been changed up pretty much entirely, and the jumps that you had to make were insane, and grabbing switches and carrying them, and it was kind of nuts. It was extremely nuts, but I did not realize the community was so far behind, not so far behind, but so much behind these games that they could have a speedrunning community for a hack, and a big one. There were like 6 people on the couch, including the creator of the hack, and then this guy that had the world record for it was playing the game. JJ, I think Michael watched the run, but at the beginning of it, he said, I guarantee you I have to die at least 7 times because of the way the game is designed.
Yeah, that sounds right.
He had to like jump into levels and die to hit a switch to then reload the level where the switch would still be activated.
Oh, wow.
And then like die again to get a key, and then the third time in the level bring the key back and like unlock a door, that sort of stuff.
Wow, that's cool.
He knew this going in and said that he was going to donate $10 every time he died.
Yeah. I saw several people do that, including at least one person who was like, oh no, I've been dying quite a bit on this run. I need to stop this or I'm going to go broke.
He died 28 times.
Ooh, yikes.
28. There's a little death counter in the top of the screen.
Oh, that's fun that they had someone counting.
Yeah. So I thought that was fantastic. It was very interesting. There was a lot of little bit of, coarse language in there for people interested in that one. But it was fascinating because it was not done with Mario Maker. It was done by hand, and it was done on a Super Mario Kart. And I just thought that was super cool. I had never seen anything like, I knew ROM hacks existed, right? But I'd never seen somebody speed run a ROM hack. You know what I mean? Like, you have to find glitches inside of somebody else's ROM hack. That's insane. And then they put Tazbot on it, and he finished it in like 4 minutes.
Of course.
Yeah. Anyway, so I thought AGDQ was pretty great this year. It's a pretty amazing event. I'm shocked that I don't know if they have time or energy or money to expand it further. Maybe add a third one, not in the Midwest, but.
I suspect that the answer to that is no, mostly because I suspect the staff is pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's only 2 or 3 like actual permanent people who work with, wrangling all the hotels and the people and all that stuff, like the logistics end of it. And I think that's intentional in order to keep the overhead to the charity low. And so at that point, with only a couple people who, essentially make that their full-time job, arranging a giant event like that seems like it's probably quite a bit of work.
Yeah, I don't begrudge them. It just makes me sad that I'm probably not going to Minneapolis anytime soon.
I think this one was actually in Virginia.
I think they have one in Minneapolis and one in Virginia, and it kind of just goes back and forth.
Yeah, if you find a place where you can get an event going well, like, don't change it if it ain't broke, man. That's the number one rule in technology. If you want stuff to break, the best stuff you can do is try and change it.
Good point.
So, especially with stuff like this where the technical side of it is so big, they have to have 500 different consoles and then a bunch of screens and ways to get the stream out. So that means there needs to be internet, and it needs to be good, which we all know is a problem in hotels everywhere.
And convention centers.
Yeah. And convention centers, and then beyond that, they have thousands and thousands of attendees who don't just sit around and watch the games. There are whole rooms and stuff on other places set up with consoles and stuff to play. Like, it's like a convention almost. So, it's obviously a gigantic undertaking, I'm sure. Obviously, I'm sure the charity would love them to do more of them. But, maybe at some point the people are the limiting factor there.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, gents, I think it's that time. If anybody had any amazing AGDQ runs that we missed, where should they go?
They could send them to an email address that we have, which is podcast@weweregamers.com. It's a really handy place to send pretty much anything you want us to hear about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You could always follow us on Twitter or Facebook or sometimes Instagram.
I mean, you could always follow us on all those places. And we're We Were Gamers on all of those. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Oh.